Okay, I'm going to get started this morning by just welcoming everyone. Welcome. Nice to see all of you guys. Welcome to Tung. Welcome to everyone who's joining us online as well. Today is our group learning program, and what I'm going to do is start with meditation to guide you guys in meditation, and then there's a topic from our book that I'm going to be sharing in order to help you guys to understand more about the path to enlightenment. Essentially, the Buddha taught teachings that's going to help you to train your mind in order to get to enlightenment. What enlightenment is where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. You no longer experience any discontent feelings. By the time you get to enlightenment, you've eliminated all your anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment. All of these feelings and others are completely eliminated from the mind. So meditation is a big component of that, but there's other things that you need besides just meditation too. So that's why after we meditate, I'm going to be sharing with you some teachings to be able to help you understand more about the path to enlightenment. So if you'd like to join for meditation, you can take a position either seated. There's also lying, standing, and walking positions. Some people sit on the floor. Some people like to sit in a chair. If you're at home, you might be sitting on a sofa or in a wheelchair or something like this. You can really sit however you're comfortable. But I'll share some guidance with you guys about meditation. The way that we're going to start our meditation is that we ease into the meditation with some chanting. If you'd like to do the chanting together, there's sheets over there on the table that are laminated and it has all the chants on there. You're welcome to get one. Yeah, feel free. Someone might even decide to hand it out where you guys can see the actual chants. They're in the Pali language, and you'll see the English translations for these chants as well. This is going to help to ease the mind into the meditation and actually get more benefit out of the meditation itself. After the chanting, I'm going to come in with some guidance to be able to guide you in the meditation. Then there's going to be a period of time where it's just quiet, and then we're going to come out of the meditation with some more chanting. When you get this chanting sheet, you're going to see that there's a lot of respect and gratitude and admiration for the Buddha in these chants. And because of that, I don't think that the Buddha actually created these chants himself, because a Buddha doesn't go around trying to convince other people to chant to him out of admiration and respect. But if you learn from a teacher how to move from the anger and the sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings to the peace and the joy that is the enlightened mind, you'd probably have a lot of respect and admiration for that teacher too. Because the Buddha didn't want anything from his students. He didn't expect anything from his students. Instead, he just shared teachings that helped them to be able to get to this enlightened mental state. And these chants probably, as I mentioned, weren't created by the Buddha, but they were created by his students. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, they did do chanting. The reason why they did chanting is it helped to commit the teachings to memory, because everything that he taught was oral. So when he was teaching, people would just listen to what he had to say, and then every 2 weeks they would come together and they would recite his teachings orally as a way to commit them to their memory. So these chants, there isn't anything mystical or magical here. It's not a rite, a ritual, or a ceremony or worship. It's not prayer or anything like that. During the lifetime of the Buddha, they only used chanting as a way to commit the teachings to memory. Nowadays, we use it in order to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. So if you'd like to chant along, you're more than welcome to. In terms of your body positioning, I see all of you guys are sitting. You can sit however you're comfortable, but I'll just give you guys a little bit of guidance for those of you guys that would like some guidance. If you're sitting on the floor, usually people have a cushion under their rear, and then they kind of lightly cross their legs. Whereas if your legs are really, really tight, this can impede the circulation and it causes pain in the body, and you're not interested in experiencing that pain. So you can just have your legs lightly crossed. Some people like to put their legs off the mat because this isn't about everybody doing it exactly the same way. You can sit however you're comfortable. Some people like to put their legs off the mat because it gets the hips up in the air and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles. The Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. So if this is comfortable for you, you could actually use this. But again, it's not about everybody doing it exactly the same way. Some people like to put their palms on their thighs or on their knees. Some people put their palms up. Some people rest their hands comfortably in their lap. So it's whatever's comfortable for you. So again, I'm going to ease into the meditation with some chanting, and then I'm going to come back in with guidance to help guide you in the meditation. And then after the meditation, that's where we'll start our class. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakeva Bodhisattva วันหังอภิวาเตมิสวากขาโตมหะวัตตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหะวัตโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมะภะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวะมนุสนังพุทโธภควติ Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, in the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathe in naturally through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเกวาพุทธังมหาเกวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเกวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเกวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเกวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, I'd like to welcome all of you guys. Welcome to everyone here at the temple. Welcome to everyone who joined us since we started meditating. Welcome to everyone who's online joining us as well. As I mentioned, today is our group learning program. What the group learning program is that each Sunday and Wednesday, I come together with students and I share with you guys the teachings that it takes to be able to get to enlightenment. This is called our group learning program, that over a 7-month period, what I do is I walk students through this book. This book is our first book of our book series called Developing a Life Practice, the path that leads to enlightenment. And I go chapter by chapter each Sunday. And we're actually coming towards the end of this program. As I mentioned, it's a 7-month program. We're going to be restarting it from the very beginning on October 20th, which is 2 weeks from now. And I teach this on Sundays at 9 a.m. here at the temple, and I live stream it throughout the world. So if you have ability to access live stream, either Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can actually attend this course in this program all the way through. And I also do this at 9 p.m. on Sundays as well. And I do this from home and I live stream it from there as well. So no matter what time zone you're in, there should be a live class available for you. And where you can't make the live class, it's recorded on Facebook, YouTube, and on our podcast. So you're able to actually participate in the program and learn slowly but surely the path to enlightenment. What enlightenment is where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you no longer experience any discontent feelings. All the anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all of these feelings, and others are completely eliminated from the enlightened mind. And this is accomplished through training of the mind. You experience focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory. You'll notice that your personal and professional relationships really blossom, that you're not being bitter and harsh and hostile in your relationships anymore. So therefore, you'll experience improvements in your relationships. That not only is your mind performing better, but you're experiencing improvements in your life because you've cultivated wisdom to be able to navigate the world and make wise decisions that are producing wholesome results for you. By the time you get to enlightenment, you'll notice that you're not even in a bad mood anymore. The causes and conditions that are producing the bad mood have been uprooted and eliminated from the mind, that it's physically impossible for an enlightened being to experience a bad mood. And this is accomplished through gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. One of the biggest myths about the life story of the Buddha is people think that he sat under a tree, he meditated, and then he instantly got to enlightenment. This isn't actually true. He gradually trained his mind over a 6-year period to experience enlightenment. And then he spent the rest of his life from the age of 35 to the age of 80 sharing his teachings with others to be able to help them to understand what it took for him to get to that enlightened mental state. And then he guided other people to this enlightened mental state. And during his lifetime, countless people got to enlightenment. And they were able to understand that they had attained enlightenment because you know what it feels like to experience anger and sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings. And when you've trained your mind for an extended period of time consistently through dedication, determination, and diligence, when you get to a point where it's been 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you're not experiencing any more discontentedness, you'll know that it's these teachings that have led you to that. So the teachings of the Buddha aren't about a bunch of beliefs. If you've been taught this way, this isn't what the Buddha actually taught. There's not a bunch of beliefs of if you believe a bunch of things and then something good's going to happen when you die. That's not what he taught. There's also not a bunch of rules and commandments. That's not what the Buddha taught either. That sometimes people think his teachings are mystical or magical or something like this. But this isn't how he taught. What he taught you to do is to learn his teachings, to examine them, to investigate them. Then you reflect on those teachings to independently verify whether they're true or they're false. And then you practice his teachings, integrating them into your life and training your mind. And by training your mind, what you're doing is you're uprooting certain pollutions of the mind that he discovered. And by uprooting these pollutions out of your mind, you'll be able to see that the mind's becoming more and more peaceful and joyful. These individual pollutions are referred to as the 10 fetters. These are 10 individual pollutions that the Buddha discovered that are keeping the mind trapped in the unenlightened state. This is where the name fetter comes from. That during ancient times, if you were a criminal and they were trying to keep you confined to a certain area, they would attach a fetter to your ankle. What a fetter is a shackle and a chain and a ball. And then they would keep you in a certain field, and now you would be confined to that area because you have this ball and this chain and this shackle around your ankle, and this was called a fetter. So these 10 pollutions that the Buddha discovered, he referred to them as fetters because it's keeping your mind trapped in this unenlightened state where you keep experiencing anger and sadness and frustration over and over and over again. But there's an escape from this. There's a way to get rid of this. There's a way to eliminate this and get to a point where your mind's only experiencing peace and joy. But you need the wisdom of how to actually accomplish that. And the way that you get to wisdom is through learning, through reflecting to independently verify, and through practice. That's why you can't believe your way to enlightenment. You need to actually cultivate wisdom and train your mind and learn about these pollutions of the mind and uproot them and eliminate them out of the mind. And this is what's going to produce enlightenment. Meditation is one aspect of this practice that you employ in order to be able to train your mind to get to enlightenment, but there's other things as well. And that's why I spend time at the end of our meditation to introduce students and go into real depth through this group learning program about how to train your mind to get to this enlightened mental state. And because we're coming to the end of the group learning program, today's topic is all the way at the back of the book. The very last section of the book is called Frequently Asked Questions, where there's these 11 frequently asked questions that students ask me, and I put them in the book so that you could understand what it is that I I would answer to those frequently asked questions. So what I'm planning to do today is go through these 11 frequently asked questions, and I'm going to share with you what these questions are, and I'm going to share with you the answers to them. And then towards the end, what I'm going to do is share a topic with you that's also at the end of this book, is how to determine if you've actually attained enlightenment. Because over the 7-month period, I'm teaching students how to get to enlightenment through this program. And then at the very end of the book and the very end of the program like this, I teach students how to determine whether you've actually attained enlightenment or not. Because this is wisdom that you're going to need on your journey to enlightenment. So if you guys would like to learn this, I'm going to be sharing this throughout the morning. We'll probably be here for a little while. If you guys would like to come and go, you're welcome to come and go as you please. It's up to you. There's actually a bathroom in the back of the room. If you'd like to make yourself comfortable, feel free to use it at any time. It's the last door on the right. There's even bathrooms outside the classroom. If you go out to the parking lot, you'll see the signs for the bathroom, and you can make your way to use the main temple bathroom if you like. We have water and snacks and stuff like that over here that's provided by our students that you're welcome to help yourself to. As I teach you today, I'm going to be pausing at different times to see if you guys have any questions about anything that I'm sharing. And if you guys have any questions, whether you're here at the temple or you're online, you're welcome to ask any and all questions that you like. The way to ask questions if you're here at the temple is that we have microphones in the white bowl here in front of the camera. You can just come get a microphone, press the gray button. You'll see the lights are going to come on, and you just wait a second or two, hold it up to your chin, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you online as well. If you speak here without a microphone, they won't be able to hear you online. For those of you guys that are online, you can ask questions by putting those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section. I'll be able to see that. Or if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any and all questions that you like. And for those of you guys here at the temple, if you get a microphone, you can take it back to your seat with you and keep it with you, because there might be somebody around you that might need the microphone, so you can share it with them. Or you might have more than one question yourself, and you could use it more than one time. So we have plenty of microphones that can be shared throughout the room. Okay, so here, I'm going to share with you guys this first part of the frequently asked questions sections. These are the first 5 questions that are out of these 11. One of the first questions that is very common that students will ask me is, how do I become Buddhist? Or how do I become a Buddhist? Well, what I would share with students is that the Buddha himself was not Buddhist. The goal of this practice isn't to become something and kind of attach a label to yourself. You actually need to drop any kind of labels like this in order to be able to get to enlightenment. So if somebody wants to assign this label of I am a Buddhist to them, this is actually going to hinder them from actually experiencing enlightenment. So there's something called the universal truth of non-self that I teach at different times in various programs. And if somebody adopts the label of I am a Buddhist, this is actually going to hinder the mind from being able to experience complete liberation. So this path isn't about becoming something or assigning a label to yourself. A better question to ask here, instead of how do I become a Buddhist, would be, how do I get to enlightenment? Right? That's what a person who is maybe considering themselves to be Buddhist should be interested in, is how do I get to enlightenment? That's a more valid question, and a more helpful and a more beneficial question. The way that you get to enlightenment is that you need to learn the teachings, you need to reflect on them to independently verify them, and you need to practice them. There's a core central teaching that the Buddha taught called the Eightfold Path, and all of his teachings in one way or another plug into this particular teaching. And I teach this in all the various programs and courses that I teach, all the various retreats. I teach the Eightfold Path. In fact, tomorrow I'm going to be starting a 5-day course, which you guys are welcome to come to any part of that you like. You're welcome to come to the entire course or parts of that course. It starts at 9 a.m. tomorrow, and it goes each day up until 3 p.m. And we take an hour-and-a-half lunch break. So if you'd like to come tomorrow, either here at the temple or online, I'm going to be live streaming it, you can attend this Foundation and the Path to Enlightenment course. And on Tuesday, I'm going to be teaching the Eightfold Path, because it's the path to enlightenment. If you are interested in getting to this enlightened mental state where the mind's peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy permanently, it's a permanent mental state, you would need to know the Eightfold Path inside and out, backwards and forwards. So that's why I teach it in all the programs that I teach. So a better question here, instead of how do I become a Buddhist, is how do I get to enlightenment? And there's various teachings that a person would need to learn, to reflect on, and to practice in order to cultivate wisdom. And the Eightfold Path is a core central teaching that someone would need in order to get to enlightenment. Sometimes people ask this question: do I need to give up all my possessions, occupations, and relationships to get to enlightenment? The short answer here is no. You don't need to do that. Sometimes people understand that the Buddha left his family and he went off into the jungle for 6 years in order to train his mind, and then he got to enlightenment. Sometimes people think that's where the story ends. But actually, the Buddha came back to where his family was, and his wife and his son and his stepmother and his cousins and brother-in-laws and people like this all ordained with him and became students. The Buddha had relationships. The Buddha had possessions. The Buddha even had an occupation. He had a livelihood. He was actually teaching, right? He wasn't getting a salary the way that we think about an occupation, but he was teaching. He had all these things. Sometimes people think that in order to get to enlightenment, you have to give up all your material possessions. Where this is coming from is that people learn about something called craving, desire, attachment. This is the cause of discontent feelings in the mind, that the mind is having this longing, yearning. The mind is craving and it's holding on to things, but it's the mind that's doing this. The craving, desire, attachment isn't the possession itself. It's not the mobile phone. It's not the computer. It's not the relationships that are the problem. The problem is that the mind's holding on to these things, wanting them to be permanent. That if the mind is holding on and holding on and holding on, wanting these things to be permanent, now maybe in a relationship, you want your mom and dad or your husband or your wife or your children to be a certain way. You want your brothers and sisters to be a certain way. And when they do things your way, you get happy or excited. But then when they don't do things your way, you might get angry or sad or frustrated because they're not doing things your way. This is the mind holding on. It's putting expectations on this person. You're wanting this person to be a certain way. And as long as your mind keeps doing that, you're going to experience anger and sadness and frustration because these people aren't going to do things your way all the time. So you don't need to eliminate the relationship. What you need to eliminate is the longing, the yearning, the wanting this person to be a certain way. Another example is if you had a craving, desire, attachment for your phone, and you're constantly looking at your phone and you're holding on to your phone. It's like, my lovely phone. Oh, it gives me so much joy and so much pleasure. And I enjoy this phone so much. And you hold on to it really tight and you're constantly checking it and you're looking at it and always enamored into your phone. Well, someday when you don't have your phone, when you misplace it, your mind's going to have stress. Oh my goodness, where's my phone? Right? Or if the phone breaks and the screen shatters, you're going to be so upset. Or if somebody steals your phone or you misplace your phone, or maybe you leave your phone here at the temple and you leave and you go away. And then like 30 minutes later, you realize you don't have your phone, right? You're going to be stressed and have anxiety because the mind's craving for this phone to be permanent. So the problem isn't the phone. You can use a phone and not be attached to it, but it's the mind longing, yearning, craving for it to be permanent. That's the problem. So you don't need to eliminate your computer, your phone, your job, your occupation, your relationships. You need to eliminate the craving for these things to be permanent. That's what the mind needs to eliminate. Then people ask, what is reincarnation and rebirth? Are they the same thing? They are not the same thing. And the Buddha did not teach reincarnation. The Buddha taught the cycle of rebirth. I'll explain to you the difference between these two things. I'll explain to you what the Buddha taught, and I'll explain to you what the Buddha didn't teach. What the Buddha taught is the cycle of rebirth, that beings come into the world and are being reborn over and over and over and over and over again until you get to enlightenment. And once you get to enlightenment, you won't experience rebirth. But each time there's a new being, or each time there's a rebirth, this is a new being. It's not the same being, that it's a brand new body and it's a brand new mind that is coming together for each individual existence. And at the end of your life, if there's craving, desire, attachment in the mind, that's the fuel that causes rebirth. So you can think about it like a cardboard box. There's cardboard box A, which is a certain shape, a certain color, a certain texture. And then there's cardboard box B, which is a different color, different shape, different size, different texture. These are two completely different cardboard boxes. Inside cardboard box A has certain contents. There's craving and residual memories. At the end of this life, when this box deteriorates, the cravings and residual memories need to go somewhere. So they're going into cardboard box B. But this is a completely different cardboard box. But the craving and residual memories are moving forward into this new cardboard box. So the same thing is happening with the mind, that in previous lives, there was a mind and it had certain experiences and there are certain memories that the mind has. And those memories move into this new mind. And this is how people can independently verify the cycle of rebirth. At least one way is that you can observe your past lives. Some people have memories of their past lives. You may or may not have experienced that right now, but as you heard me share, there's nothing in the teachings of the Buddha that are based in belief, including the cycle of rebirth. You can actually independently verify the cycle of rebirth. You might not have the wisdom of how to do that right now, but as you progress in your journey, you can independently verify that all of us are constantly being reborn over and over and over again until you get to enlightenment. And once you get to enlightenment, then you'll escape this rebirth. Okay, so this is what the Buddha actually taught, at least a little introduction to it. It's called the cycle of rebirth. The teachings of the Buddha in the original Pali language, the word is samsara. You might have heard this. In the Pali language, the word samsara is being used. And that's been translated for many, 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 many years as the cycle of rebirth. But if you look at what the Buddha is describing, there's actually nothing that's being reborn because it's a new body and a new mind every single time. So even though people have been translating the word samsara to the cycle of rebirth, a better way to think about this is the cycle of new existence. Because every single time there is a new existence. So if you think about it as the cycle of new existence, this will actually bring your mind to a better understanding of what's occurring, is that there's a new existence every single time. But there are cravings and residual memories from each life that is moving from one mind to the other. And this is why some people refer to it as the cycle of rebirth. But there's really nothing that's being reborn because it's a brand new body and it's a brand new mind. It's a completely different being. This reincarnation is not that. What people are teaching with reincarnation is that there is a soul and that this soul is reincarnated into a new body and that it's the exact same being every single time. It's just a new body and it's the same soul. Well, the Buddha didn't teach this because the Buddha actually didn't teach whether there is a soul or there isn't a soul. He never described that there is a soul or there isn't a soul. He left this as an undeclared teaching, that you can see it in his words where he says, this is my teachings and this is what I taught. And then he says, this is what I did not teach. I did not teach this. This is undeclared teaching. And one of the things that he shares is whether the soul is one thing and the body is another thing. He didn't teach whether there is or isn't a soul. So anytime somebody's talking about a soul in relationship to the teachings of the Buddha, this individual hasn't deeply penetrated into the original words of the Buddha to see that he never actually taught this. So while you might hear people use the word reincarnation in relationship to the teachings of the Buddha never actually used this word. He didn't talk about reincarnation. He didn't talk about that there's a soul. He didn't talk about a soul moving to a new body and it's a same being every single time. This actually conflicts with one of his main core central teachings, which is called the universal truth of impermanence. The universal truth of impermanence is explaining to you that things are constantly changing, right? That there isn't this permanent fixed state. So if there's a soul that is eternal and it's continuing for every single existence, this is actually conflicting with one of his very most basic teachings, which is the universal truth of impermanence. And it's also conflicting with the universal truth of non-self as well. So reincarnation and rebirth are not the same thing. And the Buddha taught the cycle of rebirth or the cycle of new existence. Then some people ask me, can I be Buddhist without believing in the cycle of rebirth? Well, the answer is yes, because you shouldn't believe in anything. And I never believed in the cycle of rebirth. As I was understanding these teachings, I never believed in the cycle of rebirth. I knew that the Buddha taught it, and I knew it was something that he shared, but I never, ever, ever, ever believed in the cycle of rebirth. Instead, I investigated it to try to independently verify whether it's true or false. And in the book series, in volume 11, chapter 105, I list out 17 different things that you can do to independently verify the cycle of rebirth. And somebody might decide that they would like to do that at some point. It's not something that I suggest people do when they first get started on the path to enlightenment, because there's many other foundational teachings that you need to learn and understand before you actually start moving forward on the path to enlightenment. But sometimes people are interested in looking at the cycle of rebirth at the beginning. But I suggest to them to set it aside, because there's so many other core fundamental teachings that you need to learn before you get to the cycle of rebirth. Because what's happened in the past is in the past. It doesn't matter anymore. And what may or may not happen in the future, it's in the future. It hasn't happened yet. Right now, you're in the human state. Your mind experiences anger. You experience frustration and sadness and annoyance and irritation and all these other discontent feelings. And the goal is to eliminate these. So focus on those teachings that are going to eliminate this. Understanding the cycle of rebirth right now isn't going to eliminate any discontentedness, but the Four Noble Truths will, the Eightfold Path will, the 5 precepts will. Understanding extensive meditation training, that's going to help you to eliminate discontentedness. So I suggest for students to start with the core central teachings, and then a year and a half, 2 years into your development on the path to enlightenment, that's a better time to approach the cycle of rebirth. So this next one is, what does it mean to take refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha? And is there a ceremony to do this? So first, let me explain to you what these 3 things are. What a Buddha is a Buddha is an individual who's come into the world and they've got to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings, and countless people get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people get to enlightenment after their death. So these are the 3 criteria, the 3 main criteria of what makes a Buddha a Buddha. They get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people. And countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. And then they will preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people get to enlightenment after their death. So that's what a Buddha is. And Gotama Buddha, from 2,500 years ago, meets all 3 of these criteria. What the Dhamma is this is the Pali word for teachings, right? So what that word means is the teachings. And then the Sangha, what this is the Pali word that means community. And a community is a community of people, because in order to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to have confidence in the Buddha. You're going to need to have access to his teachings, and you're going to need to be part of a community. This is how you learn and grow and develop in order to be able to get to enlightenment. If you only had one of these things, or you only had 2 of these things, you actually wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment. You need all 3. We refer to these as the triple gem or the triple jewel. So you need to have confidence in the Buddha, which you may not have right now. You might have doubt, but slowly but surely, as you learn his teachings, you can gain confidence in the Buddha. Then you need to have access to his teachings, which you have access to his teachings. There's books right there on the bookshelf. You can download them for free. You can take them and go print them if you like. You can get printed versions here. You can get them on Amazon. You have access to his teachings. I share videos and books and audiobooks and podcasts. It's all available for you at no cost, including personal guidance. So you have access to the teachings. And then you can have access to a community, and you can be part of a community. We have an international community with thousands and thousands of students all over the world that are studying these teachings. So you can be part of this community to learn and grow and develop. And this is part of the way that you will be able to make your way to enlightenment. So sometimes people have been taught that there is a ceremony to take refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, or the Buddha, the teachings, and the community. What refuge is protection. That they think that there's some ceremony that you can do that now you're going to have this protection from evil and unwholesome things. Well, there's nothing that you can do in terms of a ceremony that's going to give you any kind of protection. The thing that's going to protect you is your wisdom. That's what's going to protect you, is your wisdom. Because when you make wise decisions in life, it's going to produce wholesome outcomes. But when you make unwise decisions, it's going to produce unwholesome outcomes. There's no amount of water being sprinkled on you. There's no amount of chanting. There's no amount of any of that stuff that anybody in the world could ever do that's going to protect you. Because if you go out into the world and you don't have wisdom and you're making unwise decisions, unwholesome things are going to happen to you, right? If you walk up to someone and spit in their face or punch them in the face, unwholesome things are going to happen, right? You're going to not have any protection. There's no kind of ceremony that you can do that's going to produce any kind of protection. You need to have wisdom. And that's what the Buddha is providing you. He's providing you the ability to cultivate wisdom about the natural laws. So there is no ceremony from the Buddha that's going to allow you to take refuge in the Buddha, the teachings, and the community. Now, out in the world, you're going to see plenty of people that are doing ceremonies to allow you to take refuge in the Buddha, the teachings, and the community. But this isn't anything that the Buddha taught. There's people that the Buddha would be walking from one town to the other, and people would come up to the Buddha on the road and say, hey, I would like to be a student of yours. I would like to be a monk. I would like to be ordained. And the Buddha says, okay, I'm going to this next town. You can just come with me and shave your hair and put on a robe over there. Right? There was no ceremony. There was no, gala or extravagant thing that happened. It was just like, all right, come with me, put on this orange robe and shave your hair. Now you're a student, right? There's no big, elaborate ceremony in order to become ordained or to take refuge in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, because those kinds of things were never taught by the Buddha. He didn't teach rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. This isn't something that he actually taught. But you might see these things associated or attributed to the teachings of the Buddha, but he just didn't teach those things. So does anybody have any questions on any of these 5 things here that I just shared? Remember, here at the temple, you can use the microphones, and then online, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically. Any questions here? Let me just check online here, see if we have any questions. I don't see any here. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions online either. Okay, so I'm going to move to the next set of questions, which is starting here, number 6. What is our purpose in life? What is the purpose of our human existence? This is a common question that people ask. They want to know, like, why am I here? What is my purpose in this life? Well, where this is coming from, in my opinion, is an individual's ego. That the ego thinks that there needs to be some higher purpose to this existence. If you look at us from an airplane, there's 8 billion of us on this planet. We're essentially a bunch of ants running around doing different things. But the ego wants to think that there's somehow some kind of significance to your existence. If you go back to ancient times or prehistoric times, if you look at prehistoric human beings, I would suggest that the thing that they were interested in is survival. They were trying to figure out about clothing and fire and food and shelter. They weren't trying to figure out what is our significance on this planet. They were just trying to figure out how to survive, right? But now, so many centuries later, so many generations later, we've now mastered all of that stuff. We've mastered the production of clothing, the production of food, and shelter and all these other things, that now we have so much time in our life that we fill it up with unbeneficial things, right? We might spend 2, 3, 4 hours looking at social media or looking at YouTube or things like this. And while these things can be beneficial, we might use them at different times, there isn't any significance to your life. That you have a job, you have friends, you have family, you have people that you interact with, but this is just occupying your time. And you can have fun and enjoy these kinds of things, but you need to have some amount of training of your mind to be able to get to enlightenment. If you would like a real purpose to your life, it's to get to enlightenment. But taking on this burden of going out into the world and changing the world, and that's maybe what somebody thinks that their life is all about, is going out into the world and changing the world. This is a real burden to carry around. And what I would suggest for people to do is to set that aside and don't think about going out and changing the world, because the world functions as the world functions. You can't change 8 billion people to do things in the world a certain way, but you can work on changing your own mind. You can get to the point where you enjoy your work, Right now, you might not enjoy your work. You might not enjoy your day-to-day life and the things that you're doing. And that's just because of the decisions that you're making in your life. And there might be certain things that you don't enjoy about your life. And this is where some people might say, what's my real purpose here? Because there's all this extra time that you might have in your life. You might feel like things are kind of mundane sometimes in your life. You might feel kind of bored or lonely or frustrated about your life. This is just because of the way that the mind functions, and the mind is experiencing these discontent feelings. But you can get to a point where you thoroughly enjoy your life. You enjoy every single aspect of your life. And in order to be able to accomplish that, you're going to need to have some amount of training on the path to enlightenment. But taking on this burden that there's somehow some higher purpose and you have a purpose on this world, this is the ego wanting to have some kind of significance. When in reality, you're just one of 8 billion people in the world. As soon as you allow your ego to think that you're special and you're wonderful and you got to go out into the world and leave your mark on society, if you can imagine 8 billion people trying to leave their mark on society, instead go out into the world and learn how to be peaceful, learn how to be joyful, learn how to be polite and kind and friendly and respectful to people. And in that respect, you're doing something very wonderful for yourself and for others by not causing harm in the world. But trying to take on this burden of there's some kind of special purpose to your life is to just allow the ego to kind of sit there and fester and think that somehow there's this big purpose that you've got to fulfill. And now you take on this burden of trying to fulfill this certain purpose in life. So I would suggest that the purpose of life is to actually get to enlightenment. And if you can get to enlightenment, then you'll experience the peace and the joy. Your mind will enjoy that for the rest of this life, and you won't keep coming back into this world of nothing. Then sometimes people ask me, can I exercise the physical body and still attain enlightenment? The answer is yes, of course, right? The problem isn't the exercise. In fact, exercise can be very wise because it helps you to maintain the health of this body. Even though this body isn't you, it's wise to maintain a healthy body, whether it's certain food that you eat, certain hobbies and activities, or whether you exercise or not. This is really wise to maintain the health of the body. So the problem isn't the exercise. The problem that people experience is that they might have a longing or yearning, or they might be attached to exercise. So say if somebody sets up a schedule for themselves that every morning at 8 a.m. for 5 days a week, they're going to exercise. They're not going to be able to do that at every single morning at 8 a.m. It's just not going to happen. Because of the universal truth of impermanence, things are going to change. But if somebody's mind is craving and wanting and expecting to exercise every morning at 8 a.m., when they miss their workout, they might be grumpy or they might be irritable. And this is because the mind is craving permanence, when in reality, you can't do this permanently. So if you're going to exercise, wonderful, exercise. You can set up whatever amount of time, however many times a week, but just understand it's not going to be permanent. There's not going to be this fixed, rigid schedule. And if you're getting grumpy because you're not exercising, this is because of the mind's craving, desire, attachment. It's not the biology that's causing the mind to be grumpy or irritable in that situation. Sometimes people think that there's some biological process that's going on through exercise, that when they don't get their exercise, they think that they're grumpy because of the biology. But it's not the biology that's causing the mind to be grumpy and irritable. It's the mind craving and desiring and wanting this exercise to be permanent. So now when they're not exercising because they want it and they didn't get it, now the mind is grumpy and irritable. Whereas if they got what they wanted, they'll get happy. And if you don't get what you want, you get grumpy or irritable or frustrated. Another thing with exercise that we need to be aware of is that if we're exercising, it's important to not allow conceit to come into your exercise, where sometimes people can really work hard to develop a very nice physical appearance with the body. Understand that physical appearance is impermanent. You're not going to constantly look like that. Maybe you're youthful, maybe you're strong, maybe you have this nice shape of body, but over time, because of impermanence, this is all going to change. This body that you have is not permanent. It is impermanent. It's going to constantly change throughout your life. Not only the physical makeup of the body in terms of your muscles, but you're going to get wrinkles, you're going to get gray hair, you're going to lose your hair, you're going to get moles and pimples and things like this. This is all change of the body. But if you crave for this permanent youthful appearance, when things start changing, you'll really struggle in that situation. So you got to be aware of that, and you've got to be aware of any kind of ego that might be in your mind, potentially around exercising. Sometimes people can look down on others who don't exercise, and it's important that your mind doesn't do that. And this way you can maintain your fitness of your own body without looking down on other people who choose not to do that. Then sometimes people ask me, is medicine and medical procedures for the body an attachment? And the answer is not necessarily. It can be, but it doesn't have to be, right? So this question is coming from an individual who doesn't understand what craving, desire, attachment is. As I was mentioning to you guys before, it's not the object itself that is the craving, desire, attachment. It's not the phone. It's not the computer, it's not the medical procedure, and it's not the medicine that is the craving, desire, attachment. It's the mind longing, yearning for this. So for example, say that I was going to have a nose surgery. This nose surgery, it could be in order to help me breathe, because maybe you have a deviated septum and now you can't breathe unless you get this nose surgery, and it's really hard to breathe without this surgery. But you could also be getting this surgery because you're looking for cosmetic improvement of your nose and you're wanting your nose to look a certain way. In the first example, this isn't a craving, desire, attachment. The individual needs a surgery in order to be able to breathe. In a situation where you're trying to change your nose for cosmetic purposes, this is a craving, desire, attachment. The mind is longing, yearning. It's not content and peaceful with how your nose looks now, and the mind's wanting it to look different. And the mind thinks that I can't be happy unless my nose looks different than it does right now. So in each situation, it's going to depend on what's going on in the person's mind. So it's not the procedure or the medicine itself that is the craving, desire, attachment. It's how the mind's relating to this particular thing. Then sometimes people ask me, what significance can I apply to dreams? Well, there is no significance to dreams. Dreams is not true reality. But oftentimes people, when they have dreams, they wake up and they think that there's some significance behind their dreams. And they might be looking for somebody to tell them, what's the purpose of my dream? Well, there is no purpose. The mind's very creative. You can have all kinds of dreams. But sometimes people look for some future sign. Does this mean I'm going to get rich? Or does this mean my boyfriend or girlfriend's going to come back to me that I had this dream? Or any number of things like this. It's unwise to try to look at your dreams and try to discern any kind of things like that. Because if you went to Dream Interpreter, for example, you could go to 5 different dream interpreters, and I guarantee you all of those 5 people would give you a different perspective of what your dreams mean, because there isn't anybody that can interpret your dreams and give you any kind of insight that's going to tell you any particular thing about your life. Instead, you need to be able to have wisdom for yourself and make wise decisions in the world. But if you have certain dreams, it can actually help you on the path to enlightenment. So say, for example, you keep having a dream of dying, and every time you wake up, you're very scared and you're very fearful because you've had this dream of dying. And every time you wake up, you're very scared. This shows you that your mind is still attached to this existence, and your mind is longing, yearning, and holding on to this life, and you're not comfortable with death. And this is something that you're going to need to look at with your dream. Is this dream is helping you to be able to see that you're not comfortable with death. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, you have no fear whatsoever, including the fear of death. So if you're waking up each morning after having dreamed about death and you're fearful, this is showing you that your mind is not let go. Or say you have a regular reoccurring dream about an ex-boyfriend or an ex-girlfriend, and now you can see that your mind's still holding on to this person, and you need to train your mind to let go. And there are certain tools and techniques that you can use to train your mind to get comfortable with death, or to let go of this ex-boyfriend or girlfriend, any of these other things. So while there's no significance to these dreams, the dreams can give you insight into what's going on in your mind. And then you can skillfully work with this to be able to train your mind to be able to let go of these things so that your mind can get closer and closer to enlightenment. Sometimes people ask me this question: why is enlightenment permanent, because they study the teachings of the Buddha and they study the universal truth of impermanence, and they think that the Buddha said everything is impermanent. The Buddha never said everything is impermanent. He said all conditioned objects are impermanent. What a conditioned object is a conditioned object arises, it changes, and it fades away. What the Buddha also said is unconditioned objects do not arise, they do not change, and they do not fade away. So there are things that are actually permanent in the world. Enlightenment is permanent, and the natural laws of existence are permanent as well. These things actually do not arise, they don't change, and they don't fade away. So in the unenlightened state, the mind is experiencing what's called conditional experiences. There's conditions in the mind that are causing it to experience anger and sadness and frustration and irritation and all these other discontent feelings. The mind has been conditioned. It has certain pollutions that are causing these feelings to arise. By the time you get to enlightenment, you've purified the mind of all those things. You've eliminated all of those conditions. And now the mind is experiencing this unconditioned mental state where the mind is now purified. It's now unconditioned. There is no longer any pollutions in the enlightened mind. So because of that, the mind is now experiencing the peace and the calm and the serenity and the contentedness with joy. The mind no longer experiences any discontent feelings because it's in this unconditioned mental state where the mind is experiencing peace and joy. The peace and joy is not based on any condition. Over here in the unenlightened state, the anger, the sadness, the happiness, the excitement, the frustration, the agitation, the loneliness, the boredom, it's based on some condition. You look outside, you see it's sunny, you get so happy, right? But that's a condition. So that means your happiness is temporary, because when that condition changes and it's no longer sunny, it's raining, now you'll be sad or frustrated. Or if you get happy when your bank account is here, your bank account is not going to be there permanently. Your bank account's going to go down. So now when your bank account goes down, you'll get frustrated, you'll get agitated, you'll get annoyed. So in the unenlightened state, you're forming your inner feelings based on some condition. So because you're experiencing conditioned feelings, they arise, they change, and they fade away. The happiness does that. That's why your happiness is only temporary, that it's only a matter of time before you get angry or frustrated, because you're basing your happiness on some condition. And that condition is not permanent. It's going to constantly change. So if you base your happiness on your bank account, well, when your bank account goes down, you're not happy anymore. Or if you base your happiness on the sun, when the sun goes away, you're not happy anymore. Right? So this is what the unenlightened mind experiences, is conditional experiences. But in the enlightened mind, you experience unconditioned mental states, that the mind no longer forms its inner feelings based on some condition. So if the mind has been purified, it no longer bases its feelings on some condition. So for an enlightened being, if their bank account is here, okay, that's fine. If their bank account is here, that's fine too. And if their bank account's here, that's fine too. They're not forming their inner feelings based on their bank account. Or if it's sunny outside, that's fine. If it's raining outside, that's fine. If there's a tornado or a hurricane, okay, that's fine. The mind isn't forming its inner feelings based on some condition. The enlightened mind is purified. It's now experiencing unconditioned mental qualities. And this is why it's permanent. Because there's no condition that is creating the peace and the joy, that when something's changing in the world, the mental state doesn't change. But when you have conditional feelings, when you're basing your feeling on some condition, when that condition changes, your feeling's going to change. But in the enlightened mental state, you're not basing your inner feelings on some condition. Your mind is just always peaceful, always joyful, always happy. You're having unconditional happiness. No matter what's happening in the world, you can maintain your happiness. And that's why it's a permanent mental state, because there's no condition that's causing it. It's actually through purification of the mind that the mind is experiencing these qualities of peace and joy. And then lastly, on the frequently asked questions section, people ask, why are donations of support for teachers of Gotama Buddha's teachings so important? There's actually two things of the reasons why this is important. First is the continuation of Gotama Buddha's teachings, that in order for his teachings to continue in the world and be shared, there needs to be people who support them. So by sharing offerings such as time, effort, energy, and resources, or here, financial support, this is helping the teachings of the Buddha continue to be shared in the world. For 2,500 years, this is how they were shared in the world, is that since the lifetime of the Buddha, people have been supporting his teachings to be shared. So everything that you see around you is a donation from somebody, including the land that we're sitting on. This land at one point was owned by a Thai person. And somebody said, you know what? These teachings of the Buddha were so impactful and so helpful for them, they donated the land to build a temple. And this happened over 500 to 700 years ago. And then other people came around and they said, hey, let's build some buildings. So they put together some resources and they built some buildings, right? And now we've got these buildings. And then some people came along and said, hey, we need some air conditioning. Let's put some air conditioning in here. And now we've got some air conditioning. And then people said, hey, let's get a projector so the teacher can teach, right? Just one thing after another after another. Hey, let's get the sound system. At one time I used to teach here and there was no sound system. And the people in the back would sometimes have a trouble hearing. And we said, hey, let's get a sound system, right? Hey, let's get some cameras and start sharing the teachings even beyond this temple. So slowly but surely, people have contributed in ways that have helped us to be able to continue the teachings. And this started all the way back during the lifetime of the Buddha. So this is the first reason why donations are helpful, is it allows the teachings to be shared with other people. And learning these teachings is the very best thing you could ever do for your life. If you had the ability to press this button and you would stay angry and sad and frustrated for the rest of your life, or you could press this button and you would be peaceful and joyful for the rest of your life, which button would you press? A or B? Which button would you press? You press B, right? Because you like to be peaceful and joyful. Well, the only way that people can become peaceful and joyful is if they train their mind, and the teachings of the Buddha need to be accessible in order for people to train their mind. So that's one of the reasons why the teachings need to be supported, is so that more and more and more people can get access to these teachings. But then the second thing, and this is very important for you, is that by practicing generosity, this is going to lead to your enlightenment. That what the number one problem that the mind is experiencing that's actually causing discontent feelings like anger, sadness, and frustration is something called craving, desire, attachment. The mind is holding on. It's wanting things to be a certain way. The mind has selfish desires. And as long as the mind is holding on and craving permanence, you will continue to have discontentedness in the mind. So by practicing generosity, it's training your mind to let go. It's training your mind to not hold on to things very tightly. The meditation we did this morning, that's helping your mind to let go, because when you're focused on the breath, and the mind moves off the breath, you're training your mind to cut that off, let it go, and bring the mind back to the breath. So the goal of this meditation isn't to train your mind to eliminate your thoughts. That's not the actual goal. The goal is to notice your thoughts sooner and sooner. This is developing your mindfulness and concentration, and training your mind to more easily to let go. Because when you had that boyfriend or girlfriend that you guys broke up, and after you guys broke up, you were so angry and you were frustrated and you felt lonely and you felt bored, right? And you missed this person. Your mind wouldn't let go. Your mind was holding on. You were wanting this person to be permanent in your life. You couldn't let go. So the breathing mindfulness meditation is training your mind to let go so that you can gain your peace and your joy. So that's also what generosity is doing, is training your mind to let go. Right? Because what the mind does when it has craving, desire, attachment is you become selfish. You tend to hold on to things very tightly. Typically, as children, we're taught to share. We're taught to share our toys. We might be taught to share our food and things like this, but we're not always taught why. And then even if we're taught why, we oftentimes forget that as we age. And as we start working, we start applying our blood, our sweat, and our tears to whatever resources that we acquire, we tend to want those to be self-fulfilling and self-satisfying. We're not willing to share with other people. And what the Buddha is teaching you to do through generosity is to share with other people, and not to have everything that you do be self-satisfying. Because the way that we're often taught in the world is, if I spend 3 hours doing this, I want this in return. And if I spend 2 days doing this, I want this in return, right? The mind will only be willing to do something if there's something in it for you. But what generosity is generosity is where you're giving and sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources without any expectation of anything in return. And you can practice all kinds of generosity in the world. You can practice holding the door for people and letting people go in before you. This is generosity. But remember, you need to do this without any expectation of anything in return. Because if you're standing there expecting somebody to say thank you, and they don't say thank you, you'll be angry. You'll be frustrated. You'll be agitated. So you need to be able to practice generosity without any expectation of anything in return, including an actual thank you. So when people are sharing their resources with the temple or with a teacher or something like this, you need to be able to do that without any expectation of anything in return. But what a teacher should be doing is using some of those resources for themselves to be able to sustain their life, like food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. But then you should see some offerings coming back to the community. You should see a nice center to be able to come and learn. You should see classes and courses and retreats being accessible. You should see resources available for the community. And this is one of the reasons why it's helpful to be able to practice generosity, is that it helps with the continuation of the teachings of the Buddha, but it's helping you in your own mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, so that you can get closer and closer to enlightenment, so that your mind can let go and not continue to hold on to things so tightly. So if I put a price on my courses, if I put a price on my time, you wouldn't actually be able to get to enlightenment, because you're not practicing generosity. So that's why when I teach, all the classes, all the courses, all the retreats, the books, the videos, the podcasts, the personal guidance, everything is available at no cost. And then if students would like to practice generosity, they're more than welcome to, but I don't ever have an expectation that they will. I just share and help people to understand what it takes to get to enlightenment. And whether someone chooses to share with me or not is up to them. It's their choice. So you're going to need to be able to practice generosity in order to be able to get to enlightenment, where you're sharing generosity with many people, your friends, your family, your coworkers, even people you never met before. But you might also decide to share a little bit with the temple or with teachers to be able to help us to afford electric or water, things like this, to be able to actually offer these teachings. Essentially, what a student's doing is any offering that's coming to us, it's actually helping us to help you, because that's what we're doing with the offerings. Because remember, the Buddha was a prince. He was destined to become a king. He was very rich, right? He had all the royal riches that he was interested in having. So he didn't teach generosity in order to enrich himself. He was teaching generosity because he himself had to practice a certain amount of generosity in order to get to enlightenment. And because it helped him to get to enlightenment, he knew that it was going to help you too. So he taught to practice generosity to train your mind to let go. And that's why practicing generosity towards the continuation of the teachings of the Buddha is helpful for a community, but is also helpful for your own mind as well, so that you can eliminate craving, desire, attachment, and get closer to enlightenment. So do you guys have any questions on any of these? Looks like we have a question here. For those of you guys online, you guys can ask questions through Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Hi, David. This is Yan speaking. Mm-hmm. It's my third day coming here. I don't know if you have noticed. Mm-hmm. And probably I will come to the Wednesday group learning again on this coming Wednesday, but I will leave after Wednesday. So I want to express my gratitude first. Thank you so much. You inspired me so much. And my question here is about the 10th. Why is enlightenment permanent? So from what I read, there's a difference between enlightenment and nirvana. Okay, so if you say someone is enlightened, but he's not yet nirvana, he is still a person. This body is still impermanent. Like the box is impermanent. But when the person dies, the enlightenment disappears. So why do you say the enlightenment is permanent here?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that part. When someone's enlightened and they die, what did you say?
Yeah, after the person died, mm-hmm. the enlightenment to the person is disappeared.
Okay.
It's gone with the person.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me help you with this one. So once somebody gets to enlightenment and they die, the Buddha never declared what comes next. So saying that once somebody gets to enlightenment and dies, that enlightenment is gone, this isn't actually what the Buddha taught, and this isn't actually true. So enlightenment is permanent, because once the mind gets to this enlightened mental state, it will never again experience the anger and the sadness and the frustration. That mind that got to enlightenment will never again experience the anger, sadness, frustration, and all those discontent feelings. So this is why enlightenment is permanent, and why I describe it as permanent, because it will never again go back to being unenlightened. And the other thing that you said about enlightenment and nibbana or nirvana are two different things. This isn't actually true either. Nibbana or nirvana is from the Sanskrit language, and nibbana is from the Pali language. This is actually talking about the same exact thing, just using different language. We translate that into English as enlightenment. So the word nirvana, nibbana, and enlightenment, they're all the same thing. They're all pointing to the same thing, which is this mental state that you can attain within this life. And then once you attain that mental state, your mind will never again go back to being unenlightened. It's physically impossible for the mind to ever experience anger or sadness or frustration or any of those discontent feelings ever again.
Okay, I think I get it somehow. The enlightenment and the nirvana, they're the same thing. Mm-hmm. And once you are enlightened, you step out of the circle of life. So hence your mind is permanent and enlightenment is permanent. Is that true?
I'm not saying that the mind is permanent. I'm saying that enlightenment is permanent, right? The mind, a mind itself is impermanent. We know that a mind is impermanent, but enlightenment is permanent, meaning that this mind will never again experience the discontentedness. It'll never experience the unenlightened state ever again. So I'm not saying that the mind is permanent. That's not actually true.
Okay, so which means like in the lifespan of this mind, it is enlightened afterwards.
Yes. It'll never again experience the unenlightened state. So, and what you were saying is the mind is outside of the cycle of rebirth. This is true. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I somehow get some part of it, but not complete. Yeah, but thank you anyway.
Yeah, if you have more questions, you can ask more questions and make sure you can clarify it and see it very clearly. Because I have it very clearly in my mind, and just to be sure that you can get it very clearly. So feel free to ask any questions you like, either during class or we can talk afterwards too, if you like.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, it looks like we have some questions coming in here online as well. Let me just take off this mic so I can see them more clearly. Okay, this is Sean on Zoom. He's asking, is enlightenment still permanent even if someone stops meditating, stops the Eightfold Path, and generally abandons the teachings? Could the 10 fetters creep back in this case? So 2 things here, Sean, is an enlightened being will never stop practicing the Eightfold Path. It's just physically impossible for them, because it's kind of like the mind has been upgraded to a new operating system. If you think about a computer, and a computer is maybe running on this old archaic operating system of unenlightened 1.0. And as you're training your mind to get to enlightenment, you're incrementally upgrading your operating system of your computer. And now eventually you get to enlightened 9.0. And at that point, this being is now practicing the teaching so effortlessly. On your way to enlightenment, there are certain challenges and struggles along the way in order to get your mind to practice in the way that is described for enlightenment. But once the mind is actually enlightened, it will never revert back again. And it will never be able to stop practicing the Eightfold Path. It's just not humanly possible, because it's so ingrained in a person's mind and the wisdom that they'll never stop practicing the Eightfold Path, and they'll never stop practicing meditation. But with that said, if they should stop for any reason, then the mind is still going to be enlightened, that you can't stop the mind from being enlightened, that there's no causes and conditions that are producing it. So therefore, the mind's not going to stop being enlightened. So it's not that the mind is meditating, and as long as you meditate, you will stay enlightened, because that would be a cause and condition that is producing enlightenment. But it's because the mind's been purified that it's experiencing enlightenment. So an enlightened being, if they stopped meditating, which they wouldn't, but if they did, they would actually maintain the mental state of enlightenment. And to add to that, based on your second part of your question, is can the 10 fetters creep back in? And the answer is no, that the 10 fetters can't creep back in, that once they're eradicated and they're eliminated, they're completely eliminated from the mind. But if an individual did stop practicing the Eightfold Path and they stopped practicing meditation, then the fetters aren't completely eliminated. This is why an enlightened being wouldn't stop practicing the Eightfold Path or meditation, because it's a permanent mental state that's just always going to practice, because part of the fetters is that your mind understands wrong behavior and observances, for example. You no longer have doubt about the teachings. You no longer have ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. So if an individual did stop practicing the Eightfold Path or meditation, their mind is actually not enlightened yet, and the fetters are still existing in the mind. But once the fetters are completely eradicated from the mind, that mind is now enlightened, and that individual is going to be always practicing the teachings from that point forward for the rest of their life. So, okay, great question there. Another great question. I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So I'm going to move on to the next part that I have to share with you guys, which is how to determine if you've actually attained enlightenment. This is a topic that people oftentimes ask, and I put it in the back of the book for a reason. There's nobody who's going to study with me who's going to get to enlightenment in 7 months. It's just not possible. But this group learning program is a 7-month program where someone can learn all the foundational teachings that they need to be able to get to enlightenment. But then at the end of the book, I share this, which is just a little bit of basic information to be able to help somebody understand whether or not they're actually enlightened or not. The first thing, which is kind of connecting to Sean's question, is never stop practicing the teachings. No matter what, if you think you're enlightened and you stop practicing the teachings, you're actually not enlightened at that point. It's not like you get to enlightenment and then all of a sudden you start being angry and frustrated again. So you would never stop practicing the teachings by the time you get to enlightenment. The next thing is that you'll be fully practicing the Eightfold Path, which includes the 4 Noble Truths and the 5 precepts. An enlightened being is going to be deeply practicing this, and it's going to be effortless for them. When you've attained enlightenment as what we call an arahant, this is the way that we describe an enlightened being, you will have eliminated all the 10 fetters, that there be these 10 pollutions that you would have deeply learned, and you would have eradicated them and eliminated them from the mind. The mind would have been completely purified of these 10 fetters. You've cultivated a mind that is completely practicing what's called the Brahma Viharas. These are 4 healthy mental states that are actually permeating in the mind by the time you get to enlightenment. It's loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. Loving kindness is the opposite of anger, hatred, and ill will. It's having a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. Compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others. This is the opposite of indifference, where you're indifferent about the suffering of others. Or the opposite of that would be like you're worried about the world. You have anxiety about the world. Compassion is the middle way, where you have concern for the world, but you're not worried about the world and you're not indifferent about the world. You have compassion for the world. Then there's sympathetic joy. What sympathetic joy is joy for others' success, even if you didn't contribute to it. This is the opposite of jealousy or envy. So if you notice that you have jealousy in your mind, this is because you don't have sympathetic joy fully developed in the mind. By the time you get to enlightenment, you'll have fully developed sympathetic joy, where you can be joy for others' success, even if you didn't contribute to it. And then the 4th Brahma Vihara, or the 4th healthy mental state, is called equanimity. Equanimity is where you have calmness and composure, especially in difficult situations. You have evenness of temper, right? So right now, if you got a phone call that said your mom's been in a terrible car accident and she's been rushed to the hospital, she's in the back of an ambulance, she's about to arrive to the hospital, your mind might be shaken up by this because your mind doesn't have equanimity. It's not love that's causing your mind to be shaken up in that situation. It's your mind craving for mom to be permanently healthy. And mom can't be permanently healthy. It's not possible. The body is impermanent. She's going to experience sickness. But if you crave and desire for mom to be permanently healthy, when you get this phone call that mom's being rushed to the hospital because of this car accident, your mind will be shaken up. But even in a difficult situation like that, if you're fully practicing equanimity, you'd be able to be calm and composed. You realize the worst thing you could do is run across town and race across town and show up to the hospital, because you might actually get in a car accident yourself. Or at the very least, you're going to show up to the hospital and your mind's going to be all shaken up. And now you can't talk to the doctors and you can't talk to the nurses to be able to help your mom. So if you practice equanimity, where you have calmness and composure, you'll gradually make your way to the hospital. And then when you show up, you can be calm and composed. You can talk to the doctors and nurses, and now you can actually make wise decisions that's going to help your mom. So the Buddha is teaching you how to train your mind to get to the point where you're going to have equanimity in all situations. It doesn't matter what's happening around you, that you can maintain your calmness and composure. So equanimity is part of the Brahma Viharas. So by the time somebody is enlightened, they're going to be practicing all four of the Brahma Viharas: loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. Then an enlightened being is going to be fully practicing the 7 factors of enlightenment. This is a tool to fine-tune the mind and bring the mind out of a sluggish condition and bring it to the middle. So if you feel that you're dull, lethargic, you feel complacent, and you feel like you just don't want to do anything, there's actually teachings from the Buddha that lift your mind up and bring it to the middle so that you can be bright and you can be radiant and you can be cheerful. But then also, if your mind is really excited and elated and overactive, there's teachings from the Buddha that will help you calm that down and bring the mind to the middle. And it's called the 7 factors of enlightenment. This is something that I've taught in this program, and I teach it in other programs as well. So an enlightened being is going to be fully practicing the 7 factors of enlightenment. The ultimate indication that the mind is actually enlightened is this last one, that you'll know for yourself that you've attained enlightenment because you will have eliminated 100% of all your discontentedness. The mind will no longer experience any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. Even the slightest displeasure is eliminated from the enlightened mind. The mind is bright and uplifted and it's radiant. Okay, so this is how you can determine that your mind is actually enlightened. And you will know that as you're getting closer and closer to enlightenment. It's not like one day or 1 second you're unenlightened and then there's a light switch that switches and now your mind's enlightened. That's not the way it works. These qualities that I'm talking about will gradually increase in your mind. You'll gradually see more and more and more peace and joy coming into your mind, and you're going to gradually see the anger and the sadness and the frustration gradually eliminating out of the mind. So do you guys have any questions on this one? You're welcome, Sean. Pleased to help you. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. Okay, so ending out this book, there's a few things at the end of the book that I kind of include in there, and I'm just going to kind of walk you guys through these in order to help you guys. This is something from the Buddha that was part of his kind of closing words as he was dying. These are some things that he was sharing. He said, "Wander forth, O monks, for the welfare of the multitude, for the peacefulness of the multitude, out of compassion for the world, for the good, the welfare, and peacefulness of heavenly beings and humans. Teach, O monks, the teachings that are good in the beginning, good in the middle, good in the end, with the right meaning and phrasing. Reveal the perfectly complete and purified holy life. There are beings with little dust in their eyes who are falling away because they do not hear the teachings. There will be those who will understand the teachings." So this is some of the words that the Buddha was sharing at the end of his life. He was encouraging his closest students, the ordained practitioners, to go share the teachings, because there's people out there that will understand them and they'll be able to get to this peaceful and joyful mental state. It's very challenging for some people to understand his teachings, but if you take your time and you really soak your teeth into it, you can understand his teachings and you can get to this peace and the joy where your mind will never experience these discontent feelings ever again. This is actually something I wrote a long time ago, long before there was a war actually in the world, that I said the only war worth waging is the war within the mind. Win that war and you've won everything. Because essentially what's going on in the unenlightened mind is it's almost like a war. Sometimes your mind is at war with itself. All your thoughts and all your ideas, you're kind of at war with yourself. If you win that war, you've won everything. But all these other wars in the world, it's really not worth waging these wars. It just causes destruction. So here, this is something that I shared at the very end of the book, just to kind of help students understand that the ultimate goal is to win the war within your own mind. That's the only war that's truly worth waging. And then here's some words from the Buddha as he was getting closer and closer to death. He was advising his students that he was about to die. And there was this one particular student that was begging and pleading with him not to die, because this particular student was attached to the Buddha. And the Buddha said, one who sees me sees the teaching, or one who sees the teaching sees me. One who sees me sees the teachings. Because this person was begging and pleading with the Buddha not to die. And the Buddha was like, hey, hold on a second. For the last 45 years, I've been sharing teachings with you that have helped you to be able to understand true reality, to be able to understand the natural laws of existence. And if you look around the world and you see the teachings, then you see me. So when you walk down the street and you see a crack in the sidewalk, this is impermanence. If you see that impermanence and you understand the teachings well enough and you know that that's impermanence, then you see the Buddha, right? When you see the weather changing and you see impermanence, you see the Buddha. When you see somebody having craving, desire, attachment, and they don't get what they want and they get so angry and they get so frustrated, that's the Buddha, because you can see the teachings, right? It's not physically the Buddha, but if you can see the teachings in the world, you can see the Buddha everywhere around you, right? Like this little thing right here that's dropping down. This is impermanence. At one time, we had it hanging up on the wall, and then not too long ago, it dropped down. Okay, that's impermanence. The Buddha explains to us that I can't permanently hang that on the wall. It's not going to permanently be there. At some point, I'll put it back, but I just got to figure out, get a ladder, get somebody to come in and figure out how to hang it up and make it a little bit more consistent to be able to hang up there. So all this impermanence around you, all this discontentedness around you, all the different teachings that the Buddha shared, if you understand his teachings very closely, you can look around the world and you'll see the Buddha everywhere. That's the first part. The second part where he says, one who sees me sees the teachings. What he means by this is that if you live during the lifetime of a Buddha, they are a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. That if you see a Buddha, you see the teachings because they're practicing the teachings. They're a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. They don't teach one thing and then do something different. They teach something and then they do that thing because their students are learning just as much through their spoken words as they are through their actions. So a Buddha is teaching through their actions all the time. So if you see me, you see the teachings. That's what the Buddha is saying, right? He's a living, breathing, walking example of his teachings. And then these are the actual last words of the Buddha, where he's talking to Ananda. He says, Ananda, this is one of his closest students, it may be that you will think the teacher's instruction has ceased. Now we have no teacher. It should not be seen like this, Ananda, for what I have taught and explained to you as teachings and discipline will, at my passing, be your teacher. Now, monks, I declare to you, all conditioned things are of a nature to decay. Strive on untiringly. This was his last words, right? He lay down and died at this point. He knew that he was actually going to die. He gave his students a 3 months heads up that he was actually going to die. And then he knew the moment that he was going to die because he spoke these actual words. His last words were actually the very first thing you need to know in order to get on the path to enlightenment. Because as a wise Buddha, he would know that his words were going to be very impactful and they were going to be remembered and people were going to study them. So he used this opportunity of his death to actually share the very first thing that you need to know in order to get to enlightenment, which is this last part where he says, I declare to you, all conditioned things are of a nature to decay. Right? This is the universal truth of impermanence. Because the problem that the unenlightened mind is experiencing is the mind is craving permanence. You want things to be permanent. When you're with that boyfriend or girlfriend, you want them to be permanent. That money that you've got, you want that to be permanent. That job that you have, you want it to be permanent. The friends and family, you want them to do certain things permanently. And when they don't do that, you get upset. The thing is that you live in an impermanent world. Things are constantly changing around you, but the mind craves permanence. So the mind is actually craving something that you're not going to get. You want things to be permanent, but yet everything around you is impermanent. So you need to be able to get comfortable with constant change. The same way of saying that your mind craves permanence is to say that your mind does not like impermanence when something changes. So if you have a brand new car and you park it at a store and you come out and there's a scratch on your car, you might get angry. You might get frustrated or agitated. It's not the scratch that's causing that. It's not the person who scratched your car. That's not why you're frustrated. The reason why you're frustrated is you're craving for this car to be permanent. The mind's wanting this car to be permanent, but yet this car is impermanent. It's a conditioned object. It arises, it changes, and it fades away. The paint's going to fade. The upholstery is going to get ripped and torn. The tires are going to need to be changed. This is all impermanence. But as long as you're craving permanence, when your mind doesn't get what you want, you're going to be angry and sad and frustrated. So that's why when you got together with the boyfriend or girlfriend, you were so happy. You were so excited. You got what you wanted. You got affection. You got this boyfriend or girlfriend in your life. But then when the relationship was over, you were sad. You were frustrated. You were lonely and bored because the mind was holding on and wanting this relationship to be permanent, when in reality, everything around you is impermanent. So the Buddha is using his very last words here to teach you something about the world, because what the Buddha is teaching you is the way the world is. He's not teaching you the way the world should be. He's teaching you the way the world is. And what he's teaching you is that the world is impermanent, but your mind is craving permanence. And this is what's causing it to experience all the struggles and difficulties. So you're going to need to train your mind to let go and not hold on to things and want things to be permanent. Okay? So this is the Buddha's last words. And that's the last thing that I have to share here today, unless you guys have questions. So let me know if you guys have any questions here or you have anything online that you guys would like to ask. Anybody have any questions? Okay, not seeing any questions anywhere. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just end class by thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for your interest in learning the teachings of the Buddha. Thank you for coming to the temple and being interested to learn. Thank you for your questions and your interest. If you guys would like to learn more, you're more than welcome to. As you heard, this particular program is every Sunday and Wednesday. You can attend here at 9 a.m. Or you can attend online. And then also at 9 p.m. Thai time, I do it from home, and you can attend that as well. And where you can't attend live, there's a recording. So you can gradually learn. You're coming in here at the end, but we're going to actually be starting from the very beginning on October 20th. So as you guys go back to your home country, if you would like to learn, you surely can do that. The book is available for you at no cost. The classes and the courses are available for you at no cost. The personal guidance from me, if you'd like to meet one-on-one in Zoom, or while you're here in Thailand, if you'd like to talk one-on-one, it's all available at no cost for you. And the program is on Sunday and Wednesday. If you're going to be here for the next few days or even the next day or two, and you'd like to come tomorrow or Tuesday or the whole entire week, you can do that, because I'm going to be starting a class tomorrow at 9 a.m. It's called Foundation in the Path to Enlightenment. Tomorrow I'm going to be teaching from 9 to 3 p.m. And then on Tuesday, the same thing, all the way through to Friday. And Friday, we take a field trip where I take students outside on a tour. So if you'd like to come for the whole course, you can. Or if you'd like to just come for the field trip on Friday, you can do that too. At 9 a.m. on Friday, from here, I'm going to be taking students to some temples outside the city, and I'm going to tour them around and teach them about the artwork, the architecture, and the symbolism of the temples, so that now there's more meaning and more interest when you go visit temples. Instead of just, wow, that's pretty, or wow, that's beautiful, let me take a picture of that. You actually understand what these things are. So if you'd like to go on the tour, then you can just be here on Friday if you'd like, or you can attend the whole course if you'd like. So we have classes and courses and retreats all throughout the month and all throughout the year. You're more than welcome to attend. You're more than welcome to get all the books that you like through the website or any other way. I suggest students start with the first book. That's the best place to start. So again, thank you. Whatever you choose to do today, have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Perhaps we'll see you next time. Take care. Be well. Sawadee krap. Sawadee krap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.